Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to the Carterton Council meeting on Wednesday, the 29th of June 2022. And I'd just like to start by acknowledging everyone that's in attendance, those who are joining us in the room and also those that are joining us online, and all those in the public that are watching this virtually, and those that are here in public gallery and public forum. Welcome. I'd just like to acknowledge the fact that the meeting is being conducted a bit differently in the fact that half the elected members are online and half are here physically. So during this meeting, I request if the elected members can please keep their cameras on, and we'll do the best we can to make sure when you raise your hand to record that and get you to speak. So if you could do that, please. And I'd like to start by with an opening karakia. And Robin, could you do the opening karakia, please?
Kia ora, Karakia Timatanga, mai te paemonga raro ki te tai, mai I te awatonga raro ki te awaraki, tēnei e te hapori, awhi ai e taratahi, whano, haere mai te toki, homi e, hui, tae ki e.
Okay. Kia ora. First item on the agenda then is apologies. We have an apology from Jarrah Fox from Huanui Marae. And from what I ascertain, that's the only apology. No others. So can I have a mover to accept the apologies, please? Jill, seconded by Dale. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Carried, thank you. Are there any conflicts of interest declarations? Jill.
Yeah, I've got a couple. Item 7.2, just to let you know that I've been part of the Mangatureri Restoration Society, who is mentioned in the report, working alongside Don Bell for over 10 years now.
Okay.
And secondly, item 7.4, declaring that my partner has advised the animal shelter project.
Okay, thank you. That's noted. Brian?
Yeah, I have one on a conflict on item 7.6 on page 98, the Eastern Growth Area, as I'm a landowner in that area.
Okay, that's noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other conflicts of interest? No? Okay, well, they've been noted. Thank you. Right, so now we move to public forum, and we have 3 speakers in public forum. And the standard procedure is each speaker will have 5 minutes, and in that 5 minutes you need to include time for questions if you'd like to take questions. So we have one speaker in the room. We'd like to ask him to come up first. Don, would you like to come to the table and just sit here, please? Thank you. So welcome to the table. You have 5 minutes, and yeah, leave time for questions if you'd like questions. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. If you have a copy of my one-pager, you'll know that I represent Sustainable Wairarapa on your Wastewater Advisory Group. At recent meetings, it's become increasingly apparent to us that the Greater Wellington proposal would be preferred. Too much has been invested in time and money by people from both councils for it not to be selected. However, we do intend to convince you that there are good reasons for having a plan B and for taking a longer term view. If for no other reason, then pines seem to be replacing poplars on our hill country. Between Kevin Snowden and I, we intend to convince you to set aside some land for a short rotation coppice willow demonstration area so that you can evaluate our claims. One option is for it to complement the proposed Manuka trial, which has already been approved in principle by the advisory group. We would very much like to discuss this in more depth with your CEO or the advisory group. And reading through the hundreds of pages of reports and presentations put forward by Greater Wellington over the last 2 years, I do have a couple of queries. One is, what quantity of nutrients are going to be taken up and then removed off-site in the harvest? And secondly, how much wastewater is going to be used? These key performance indicators are at the heart of your goal to treat wastewater on land and to keep it out of the streams. However, I cannot find where Greater Wellington has given you any estimate of the weight of biomass likely to be harvested from the site. And secondly, their estimate of likely water requirements is inexplicably low. It's less than 1/3 of what you've been irrigating under your centre pivot system. I'm sure your CEO will be seeking some clarification and an assurance that the nursery system will do the job. However, there is good news. If you were to grow a crop of short rotation coppice willow, you could use twice the volume of water. And in fact, the data from overseas research suggests that with fertiliser and good soils, you might use up to 5 times the water compared to irrigating pasture. You will have these conditions, so the results could be very interesting. Not only that, but you have some exciting opportunities for using the biomass, especially considering the government incentives to invest in climate mitigation technology. You could use it as fuel wood and replace coal in local boilers. You could develop a biochar industry, and I've given you some ideas on the one-pager. There is no reason really why wire wrapper biochar could not be in every bag of compost, every bag of potting mix, every bag of garden mulch that passes out of New Zealand garden centres. Furthermore, Kevin Snowden will next tell you what the future could be for other biochemicals extracted from short rotation coppice willow. So to reiterate, please consider making provision for a short rotation coppice willow demonstration area, and please make time for us to meet with your CEO to have a more in-depth discussion. On behalf of Sustainable Wairarapa, thank you.
Thank you, Don. Questions?
Does Kevin want to?
No, he's speaking separately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Joel.
Asked on what kind of irrigation system will you be using for coppice willow?
That's a very good question, Jill. Since meeting with Kevin and Robert, we've discussed this, and in line with the experience overseas on the larger scale coppice operations, we're suggesting a drip irrigation system. Now that allows mechanical harvesting over the top of the coppice. It's also compatible with the Greater Wellington Nursery proposal. The advantages of a drip irrigation system are firstly that the water goes directly to land. There's no issues associated with aerosol drift. In other words, the smells can be minimised. You're not concerned about the wind interfering with your irrigation. You could also reduce any likelihood of aerosol drift of bacteria or viruses. Furthermore, you could irrigate right up as much as practical to the boundaries of your site, and so increase the area of your irrigation. And it's eminently applicable to any biodiversity areas that you might establish, such as, say, manuka in some of these areas that you can't.
Yes, that's 5 minutes. Is there room for one more quick question? Robin.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Don. Just you mentioned you are asking for a small amount of space. Can you quantify that amount? I mean, what is a small amount? Are we talking, 5 hectares, 1 hectare?
2 or 3 hectares, please.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Next
you.
question, Steve.
Thanks, His Worship. Don, I just have a question. You've mentioned in your report that the other 2 Wairarapa councils might look to plant short coppice willow. I believe Marsden District Council have already trialled this, haven't they? And they discontinued it. Is that correct?
Well, the trial came to an end effectively, and I haven't had any further discussions with them about it. So I don't know what their attitude is about any further expansion of a coppice willow setup.
Thank you. It'll be good to know that moving forward.
Thank you. Brian.
Yeah, Don, thank you for your presentation. Can you please explain to us how you'd envisage the proposal to be set up that you're setting up, want to set up? Sustainable Wairarapa I presume you want to lease the land and run it yourself, and do the harvesting and marketing, etc., right to the end? No, not. You want an outside entity to set it up and run the operation?
No, having discussed this with Robert Coulson, who formerly owned RST Environmental Solutions, they have all the experience and knowledge, and they also have the willow planting material from their nursery in Cowtree. So we would envisage that they would be engaged as specialist contractors to establish and manage the crop through to harvest.
And the marketing side of it?
Well, the marketing side of it, assuming that it's just a demonstration area, the initial marketing would be local. We would be looking at the fuelwood option and the biochar option because, as Kevin will likely tell you, unless you've got some reasonable scale, the biochemical extraction is impractical.
Okay, well, let's leave it at that. We'll go over time, but thank you very much. Much appreciated, Don. Now, Kevin, I'd like to ask you to join us, please.
I need to phone him now on the Portacom.
Can I just talk to this?
He's there.
Yeah.
Online.
Yeah, kia ora, Kevin, go ahead.
Cool. Thank you for having me. And I'm just I hope that there's a PowerPoint of my presentation going ahead, and I'll just ask someone to turn the page. So GreenChem has been around for Green Golf and predecessors since 2005. I spent the 2000s working on willows as part of that. And in terms of our expectation for willows, we must have easy contour country, suitable for mechanical planting and harvest. So you're thinking about hay paddocks, maize crops, etc. The willows are really a sprinter in terms of their growth. And so adequate summer rainfall is important, about 100 mils per month. But if we're irrigating, we'd expect to get that, and we'll get very good productivity as a consequence. The critical issues for willow, once again, it's a sprinter. So unlike something like radiata pine, it will get held back dramatically by weeds. It's 3 or 4 years until the first harvest, and then 2 to 3 years after that in rotations, because you're dealing with an established root system, and that's the great advantage of this system. Moving to the third slide, let me just turn my page. That photo depicts less than one season's growth on willows that are growing on 4-year-old stools. So the root system is there, and it just throws up very good biomass production year on year. Growth is quite spectacular, and let me say there's been considerable international experience with short rotation willows, research and production in England, Ireland, Sweden, Poland, Europe, and North America. Moving to establishment, it's, as I said, tractor country. You're planting into cultivated soil using a mechanical, it's a Swedish planter, planting 2 double rows pretty close together, and then there's a bit of a bigger gap between so that the harvest machine can straddle those 2 intermediate rows. Planting can be 1 hectare per hour, and if you understand 12,000 stems a hectare, that's a lot of stakes going in the ground. And we see the surface irrigation drip line going down between the 2 narrow rows, leaving the tractor to be able to operate elsewhere. Moving to the next slide, the harvest operation, once again, you've got existing harvest machines that have been built and operated. They're essentially a maize harvester, but much stronger. And the productivity of that is a bit slower because you're dealing with wood, not essentially a grass. But on that photo, if you can see it, that's about 4 years of slow growing willow, getting to about 8 or 9 meters tall. And it's chipped, which is the way that we want our material going into biomaterials. Just understand that we're also interested in growing eucalypts. Our technology does not work on radiata pine as a softwood, but it works on any flowering tree. So eucalypts, poplars, willows, acacias, etc. The eucalypt will be grown for about 12 years, and there are systems around the world to do mechanical harvest. But once again, on easy contour country, as soon as you're doing small wood on steep country, your costs of harvest go up dramatically. And then there's a slide that I just want to, there is a purpose to all of this. We're not just growing wood for the sake of it. I've worked around this technology for a number of years, become very interested in the value proposition, I guess, to grow green, biodegradable, high-value plastics. And our process separates out the lignin using pressure, ethanol, and water. That lignin is a substitute for the highest value parts of oil, and it makes pretty exciting stuff. Our second stage is to steam explode the wood chips into pulp and then convert that with enzymes into glucose. And another company has the technology in Martin to process that glucose into biopolymers, which are biodegradable, food safe, etc. When we combine those two polymers, lignin and PHBV, we end up with some really interesting plastics, and we're just beginning to explore. But they'll become things like 3D filament, food packaging, all sorts of different things. And when we finish with them, we'll be able to reprocess them, so long as we can keep it out of landfill. So that's the business. As Don said, we are looking to scale. We're expecting to establish crops in the Manawatu at Fielding. We're talking to the Manawatu District Council, but we expect to extend that into Palmerston North. We hope to get to about 1,000 hectares of willow, 4,000 or 5,000 hectares of eucalypt, and we'll have an industrial scale plant that's making a difference both in terms of climate change, water quality, landfill, etc., etc. And by the way, also a good business. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Kevin. We're on time, so we'll just quickly ask for questions. Any questions, councillors? Dale.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Just the purpose of what you've just shared with us, is that in support of SWI's, Don's presentation? Is it to provide more information for us, or are you looking to express interest in operating a nursery going forward, or all of the above, I guess?
In a sense, all of the above. Don invited us to come and talk about willows because I've worked around it for 15 years. There's no doubt that Greenchem and the other company here are keen to establish crops. We'd probably like to establish them ourselves, in that we're an industrial plant. We're spending literally tens of millions, probably over $100 million, and we need to keep that fed. So we're going to be looking for long-term contracts, if not ownership of the crop. I hope that we extend in the Wairarapa beyond what is being proposed here, and we're probably the most interested in having, if the poplar nursery goes ahead, having a small part of it dedicated to growing as a nursery for our future needs as we develop further.
Okay, thank you. Question from Steve.
Thanks, Greg. Kevin, the international countries that you mentioned earlier,
yep,
are they all using the wastewater from human waste to grow the coppice willow?
Not in every situation, but there are places like, I've been to a site in between Stockholm and Uppsala, a place called In Shopping, where they were growing these crops using the wastewater, and they're doing it very successfully. The reason that they have much lower productivity than us, and it all comes down to summer rainfall.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. David Boone, I see you have your hand up, but unfortunately in this environment, questions can only be asked by councillors. So thank you very much, Kevin, much appreciated. Cool. That will feed into the way that we work forward. So thank you, very much appreciated.
Thank you.
So now on public forum, I'd like to welcome Micah Hervel, who's going to talk to us about free fares. Mika, you have 5 minutes, and please allow time for questions. So go ahead, Kia ora.
Kia ora. Yeah, my name is Mika. I'm here on behalf of the Aotearoa Collective for Public Transport Equity, which is the coalition behind the Free Fares campaign. So we're a group of 70 different climate groups, churches, student associations, poverty action groups, disability action groups, political groups, and city and district councils across the whole country. And we're calling for central government to fund free public transport for tertiary students, under 25s, community service card holders, and total mobility card holders and their support people. So I'm talking to you today because I wanted to bring your attention to a remit put forward by Porirua City Council to the Local Government New Zealand conference taking place this July. A copy of this remit has been sent to your public forum team for you all to read over, and they'll be circulated around, I'm sure, through LGNZ channels as well. With this remit, through LGNZ, you have the opportunity to join the voices of thousands of New Zealanders calling for public transport equity. And the best thing is that it costs you nothing. Increasing our public transport patronage and removing cost barriers is key for mode shift towards a cleaner, greener New Zealand, and acting in line with the urgent climate emergency our government declared. So this remit is important because we need as many voices calling for equitable public transport as possible. As mentioned, we're in a climate emergency, and over the past 3 decades, our transport emissions have doubled. And for many of our poorest and most vulnerable people, cost is a huge barrier to using public transport. Supporting the Free Fares remit through LGNZ sends a signal to government that more investment needs to be made in public transport. We know in many parts of New Zealand, people still don't even have regular access to reliable public transport, and increasing the frequency and reliability is really important. But if the people who need it can't use it because it's too expensive, then what would be the point? Cost is a huge barrier to equitable transport use, and we're asking Council today to support the remit as a stepping stone as well towards future investment in public transport. So as mentioned earlier, this costs Council nothing. All this remit asks is for councils to use their voice to advocate to central government for this ask. Rates won't have to go up. This remit is not asking Council to commit money to make fares free for target groups. This remit asks councils to join the many voices already calling for free public transport for these target groups. Supporting this remit and advocating alongside other councils for government to honour their commitment for a climate emergency does not cost Council a cent. However, as climate change continues to worsen, it's often more isolated communities that are impacted most by severe flooding, terrible weather events, as we've seen on the East Coast and in Canterbury. So calling on government to act now is hugely important to protect some of these vulnerable communities. This is a great opportunity for Council to stand up as representatives for their community. The majority of New Zealanders support this climate action and want to see people living with dignity, and everyone should have the opportunity to access public transport so they can get into education and employment, and currently a cost is a huge barrier to that. Council has an opportunity here to stand up and stand alongside these hardworking ordinary New Zealanders who want this ask from central government, and this remit gives a great opportunity for Council to do just that. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Dale's got a question.
Yeah, thank you, Dale Williams, councillor. Why are you not advocating for free public transport for everybody? I mean, over here in the Wairarapa, the largest cohort of public transport users are commuters, and many would fall outside of the specific groups that you're promoting. So I just asked the question, why is not full free public transport your goal?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We see when it comes to changing towards a carbon neutral, greener New Zealand, we see the sort of equitable, just transition as prioritizing those who are most vulnerable to these big shifts in our systems and structures as really key. And it's also, we see it as a stepping stone towards more investment in public transport for it to be then eventually free for everyone. So I guess, in a sense, it's about prioritizing those who are going to suffer the most when there are going to be big changes. But yes, it is eventually we want to see public transport to be free for everyone across the board.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Ryan?
Yeah, thanks, Mika, for your presentation. I just got one question. There's no such thing as a free ride, whether it be paid directly or indirectly by us ratepayers and more everybody. It'll be taxpayer money that will fund this. So, you know, there's got to be a cost your presentation doesn't sort of indicate that there's going to be money coming from somewhere else, is there?
Yeah, so I mean that's a quite a complicated issue, because you're right, there will always be a cost. We do know that government has several different avenues set up to fund stuff like this. So for example, we saw in the budget this year some money, several billions, come out of the emissions trading scheme, which I believe is funded through the emissions trading scheme, some climate response fund. And then there's also the land transport fund, which is for mode shift in the transport area. So there are funds that government has set aside for this. But we also know that the half price fare discount that we have had over the past few months has resulted in an increase in ridership. And that costed an estimated 25 to 40 million to make it half price for everyone in the country. And it's estimated that making it completely free for everyone could cost somewhere around the realm of 320 million. To put that in perspective, 3 months of this fuel tax cut of 25 cents off every litre cost the government 350 million. So although you're right, and there will be a cost, there are funds set up for that cost, and ultimately that cost will be a lot cheaper and cost a lot less than our other private vehicle using alternatives.
Okay, thank you. We're a fair way over time now, so we might conclude there. But Micah, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you for your time.
The Deputy Mayor and myself will be going to the AGM, and we'll be voting, and as council we'll be discussing all the remits too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So now the next item on the agenda is the Youth Council views on agenda items. And I understand our Carterton Youth Council has 6 new members, which is fantastic. And presenting on a video, we have Angela Marie Bell. So there's going to be a video played just at the moment.
The Youth Council has one comment. We love the use of bright, vibrant colours and images in the council agenda.
Here's an update from the Youth Council.
Last week on Matariki, the Youth Council was invited to a private screening of Whena by Carterton, which David and I attended.
We have been invited to Rockwest and we will be attending on the 1st of July.
We have 4 new members joining the Carterton Youth Council, and this is one of them. What is your name?
My name is Lucas.
And why did you join the Carterton Youth Council?
Because I wanted to help my community.
Thank you.
Can't beat that.
Yeah. Stand for council.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'd like to acknowledge that feedback. Lots of colour is good, and certainly in the winter colour is great, and also it's great to see the Youth Council in a very vibrant space with a new crew too. So, kia. So now we move on to item 6, which is the confirmation of the minutes. So is there any comment on their accuracy? No, so I take it that they're a true and accurate record. So we'll move to the recommendation, and that the minutes of the ordinary meeting, council meeting held on the 25th of May 2022 are true and correct. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Dale, seconded by Jill. All those in favour, say aye. Aye. It's carried, thank you. Right, so now we move into the guts of the meeting, into the reports, and first one is 7.1, and I'd like to welcome to the table Corporate Services Manager Kelly Vestalius and she's going to present the draft annual plan 2022-2023 for adoption and the rates resolution.
Thank you. So this report is around the adoption of the annual plan. It will allow us to set rates for the new financial year beginning on the 1st of July. As you'll know, it's been quite a process getting the annual plan to this point. We started at the end of last year, working through the budgets and projects, considering changes, engagement with the public, and we issued a draft for public feedback at the end of March. Since then, we have made just a few other changes, and that's enabled us to bring the rates increase back slightly from the 6% indicated in the draft annual plan to 5.75%. So that is still an increase against the 4.52% from the long-term plan, year 2 of the long-term plan. So the report does touch on some of the reasons for those increases, and I'm sure everyone is quite aware of the, I suppose, the cost pressures that individuals and businesses are facing at the moment. I will just flag one area under the section 4.2. I have noted that our rates increase does not include the Greater Wellington rate. So Greater Wellington sets their rates themselves, but we do collect the rates on behalf of that council. So we include the rates separately, but within our invoice. I have looked at the draft annual plan online, which is for adoption tomorrow, and the indication for the increase for Carterton residents is an average of 15% increase. So that will be, I suppose, showing up in our invoice that gets sent out for instalment 1. Otherwise, I think I'll leave it there and take any questions.
Yeah, thank you. So what we'll do first, councillors, if we can, we'll just take questions and then we'll open it up for comment discussion. So it's been a well-worked annual plan, and I'd just like to acknowledge the work that management have done, especially Kelly's team, to really go line by line and trying to keep this rates rise as low as possible. But questions?
Robin's got a hand up.
Oh, yes, too. Yeah, Robin, go ahead.
Thank you. Kelly, on page, sorry, I'm just page under 4.2, where you mention about our rates increase is not within the self-imposed limit by council. On behalf of ratepayers, can you explain any implications with this?
Sure. So as part of the long-term plan, council sets a maximum rates increase that council plans to follow for the years of the long-term plan. So the limit set was 2% plus the Burl cost index. So that for this year was 2.8%, so giving us a maximum of 4.8%. We would need to be within that to comply with our self-imposed limit. Unfortunately, Burl hasn't updated they only update annually. So that was in October, the 2.8%, and we have seen, I suppose, costs increase quite significantly, more than 2.8%. I'm sure everyone has heard in the media. So unfortunately, we have not been able to keep within that self-imposed limit. There are no, I guess, implications for that other than to note that we have breached that limit, and possibly something to be aware of next time we set those limits within the LTP.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I think it was sort of more just, the wording saying that we, have obviously, we're not within the limits, and some ratepayers are going, well, what does that mean? Do we get fined? So thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
Thank you. So any other questions? Steve.
Thanks, Greg. Kelly, just one minor thing that some people out in the community might pick up on underneath your risks on page, I think it's page 7 or page 10 of the full document. That's under the delivery of 3 waters. You've got down, and council will no longer provide water services or own the related assets. Shouldn't that line be removed now, because we will own a share, so that it's not, we will still own the assets as such?
Perhaps I could answer, Councillor Creaney. The legal ownership, and which is what most people consider when we talk about ownership, legal ownership will not be with council. Legal ownership will be with the water services entity. Council, under the proposed water services entity bill, will own a share, and that share won't actually have any financial value. It's essentially similar to the Kiwi share that was talked about quite a long time ago with telecom. The share will have voting rights, and it will have the right to block any transfer of those water services entity assets to private companies. But in terms of legal ownership and beneficial ownership of the assets, they will no longer remain with council, and they will move off our balance sheet and onto the balance sheet of the water services entity.
Thank you.
Cool. Any further questions? So rather than opening up for discussion or comment, because this is our core business, I'm going to ask a comment from each councillor. So I'll start with those online first. So Steve, you're on the top of the screen. Go ahead.
Thanks, Greg. I'm just very grateful of the work that Kelly and her team have done, as you've already mentioned, to get us to the percentage that we've managed to achieve. I know we were a lot higher than that some time ago, and there's been a lot of work has been put in to bring that percentage down. As you mentioned in your report, Greg, it's still going to impact on our ratepayers, but I believe we've done the best we can, and I look forward to trying to improve things in the next year as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, kia ora, Steve. Rebecca, you're next.
Maybe come back to me. This girl's a bit sad at the moment.
Yeah, certainly will. Robin.
Yeah, I echo what Steve said. Thanks to Kelly and the team for sharpening the pencils as much as you were able to do, and sort of looking at things a little bit differently to see where savings could be made. Obviously, 5.75 is above what we had projected in the LTP, but the world has changed a lot in the last 12 months. And we know that inflation's running at 6.9%. So I just want to echo on my behalf as an elected member, a thank you for all the hard work that I know has gone into this, and long hours as well. Kia ora.
Yeah, kia ora, Robin. Russell.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add. It's all been said. Well done. Thank you.
Kia ora, Russell. Brian.
Thanks, Greg. I just want to reiterate the words that have already been said, and yes, it has been a really thorough process, and Kelly has and her team have sharpened their pencil quite a few times for us, which is really appreciative. I'm just a little bit concerned that GW rates, whilst we collect them and they're on the same invoice, their increase of 15% approximately will reflect on our overall bill at the end of the day. At the end of the day, it's the bottom line that people look at on their rates, and I'm just wondering if there's some way that we can actually explain that better with an explanation letter when the invoices go out or something like that.
We have, sorry, if you don't mind me commenting on that. We have talked about with the first instalment, we send a rates insert, and we are planning just to make it a little bit clearer on there that the portion relating to Greater Wellington has been set by that council.
Yes.
I think it still makes sense to send one invoice with both amounts, otherwise you get two invoices and it just gets a bit tricky. But we do want to spell it out to ratepayers that they are very separate rates, and Greater Wellington do give ratepayers the chance to engage and give feedback and submit on their plans as well. But I do think sometimes the focus really is on where people live and us as their primary council. So also open to other suggestions for communicating that to our ratepayers.
Thanks, Kelly. I think it's important that we do communicate that more clearly to our ratepayers. And it sounds like you're onto it, so that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Rebecca, are you good at the moment?
Yep. Thank you.
Great, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I've got a very sick baby at home, so we're stuck on the couch, unfortunately. Yeah, I just want to say thank you as well, reiterate everything that's been said. Thank you, Kelly, for your work on this. We're in a much better position than we thought we'd be a few months ago in terms of asking people to dig into their pockets once again. So thank you very much. And yeah, we're working in quite a challenging environment at the moment with, you know, construction costs and inflation, etc. So although we're signing this off today, there's still a lot more work to be done over the next year to see this come into effect. So thank you, and thanks to the team.
Yeah, kia ora, Rebecca. Jill.
Yep, very happy with this process, and as probably some of you will know, I haven't always voted for the adoption of annual plans and long-term plans in the past. But yes, as the others are saying, you know, rising costs, and these are obviously reflected in delivering council services. So very happy, and thank you for all the hard work.
Yeah, kia ora, Jill. Dale.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I suppose when things don't go well, council has to own it, and I hope that this result is measured under the same views, because, you know, where we started from, as people around this table know, we were into double figures, and there's been an extraordinary amount of not just hard work but skills and experience brought to this to get it down to the 5.75. As long as I've been in local government, people are critical of councils, or the target, I guess, is to keep rates increases within CPI, even though we know councils' costs are driven by things outside of CPI. So we're not consumables or food or whiteware, we're fuel and construction and infrastructure, which are different. However, to the general public, rates increases should be kept within CPI. Well, in Carterton District Council's case, this rate increase that we're in the process of adopting is well under the current CPI rate of New Zealand. So again, I hope there's some acknowledgement of that out in the general public. So all things considered, taking everything into account, I think this result is extremely good. However, and countering that, every increase impacts people. We get that. Every increase impacts. But I have to say, in this particular regard, council has performed better than most other industries at this point in time. So again, I want to acknowledge our leadership team and staff on the council, and also councillors, because we've put an extraordinary amount of energy into this as well to get to the result. And I'll finish by agreeing completely with Brian. It's something I've been a bugbear of mine ever since I've been in local government, is councils collecting somebody else's invoice. I strongly advocate for, yes, one envelope, but two separate invoices on two separate letterheads. Because what happens is, when the general public open, doesn't matter how many other organisations are included in our bill, they go to the bottom line and they go to the call centre phone number at the bottom, and that's ours. And we can explain till the cows come home, but what a tie-up of our time, staff's time, and copping that immediate flack of the bottom line, because our increase is 5.75, but the regional councils is 15, and we're going to have to carry the can for that in terms of explanation. So I agree completely, Brian. I think I think it's worthwhile financially for us to collect the invoice, but I think we can do much more separation within the envelope to make it crystal clear that we own our own invoice, but we don't have to own others. Thank you.
Yeah, kia ora. And just to conclude, from my perspective, this is a result of a good process, and it's certainly been a challenging times, whether you take COVID and the economic environment we're in. But just put that in context to what's happening nationally in New Zealand. Look at the percentage rates in a lot of councils around New Zealand. Internationally, inflation in some countries a lot higher than ours, and experiencing the same issues that we are. Shortages, supply costs going up across the spectrum. But I believe this annual plan deliverables are good. It enables our community to be serviced well, allows for growth and real vitality. So well done to the team. So with that, and is there any other further comment? No. So we'll go to the recommendations, and there's quite a few of them. So we are going to take them separately, and I'll combine a couple of them, but basically into 8 recommendations. So we'll start with the first one, which is we received the report. So can I have a mover, please? Moved by Brian, seconded by Jill. All those in favour? Anyone against? No, carried, thank you. We'll now move on to number 2, and I'll read it out. Adopts pursuant to Section 95 of the Local Government Act 2002, Draft Annual Plan 2022-23, including the schedule fee and the charges, Appendix A as Attachment 1. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Jill, seconded by Robin. All those in favour, say aye, please.
Aye.
Anyone against? Carried, thank you. So now we'll move to recommendation number 3, and it's actually broken down into a whole lot of segments from points A to S. So I'll be taking all those together, and I won't go through every single point, but I'll read the first part, which is puts it in relevance. So pursuant to the Local Government Rating Act 2002, sets the following rates for the period commencing the 1st of July 2022 and ending the 30th of June 2023. All amounts are expressed as being GST exclusive, and that's A to S.
Inclusive.
Oh, sorry, inclusive. Why did I get exclusive? That's inclusive.
Don't do that.
Adding another 15.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so can I have a mover for that, please? It's Rebecca, and seconded by Dale. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move on to number 4, and I'm going to take number 4, 5, and 6, and 7 and 8 together. Is that all right, Kelly? Yeah. And it's about agreeing that all rates. Well, it's all to do with water, isn't it? Yeah.
It's instalment.
It's instalments. Yes. Yep. So it's as it's laid out there on the agenda.
In all the dates.
And all the dates concerned. So 4, 5, and 6 together, and 7 and 8. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Jill, seconded by Brian. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone against? It's carried. Thank you. Well done, everyone.
Good work.
We're in business for 12 months. Right, so now we move on to item 7.2, which is the expansion of the land-based discharge of treated wastewater at Daleton Farm. And Chief Executive Jeff Hamilton will speak to that. Go ahead, Jeff.
Kia ora. Thank you, Worship. So there was this paper here and quite a lot of supplementary data in the attachment pack, which relates to the multi-criteria decision that we have done as part of this paper. Councillor Creetney has chaired the Wastewater Treatment Advisory Group over the past period of time, and that has facilitated the conversations with the advisory group as to the plant species that may be best suited to the particular area that we're talking about, 21 hectares on Daleton Farm. As you've seen in the public forum, there are a number of reasonably passionate views around the best solution for Carterton Council, and we have tried to consolidate the views of the advisory group into this paper. It'd be fair to say that those views differ, and getting a solution was quite challenging for the advisory group. Hence, the decision was brought back to this council for the final decision around the irrigation area. I would like to make a comment that Greater Wellington have suggested that or noted that their proposal for a pole nursery is exclusive, so it does require the entire area. There doesn't appear to be the ability to split the area into smaller sub-segments to allow a difference, so that they were seeking either the entire area or nothing. What we've already done, as I've noted in the paper, is I have already carved off 5 hectares for a Manuka trial nursery in conjunction with ESR and Ra Smith. It'd be fair to say that the overwhelming support for Indigenous nursery or Indigenous species on the land was quite clear from iwi groups. There was not there was resistance to poplar and willow, partly because of being exotic and partly because of the history with willow, particularly in our waterways. Hence, there was a desire towards native, and we see that in future there is the potential for that native, and particularly a native seed nursery, could be expanded on other areas. At this time, the recommendation is that the best solution and the cheapest solution and the quickest solution for council is to build a partnership around a pole nursery, and that's the recommendation in the paper.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to open up for questions now. So questions, please. Dale.
There is the opportunity though, isn't there, Jeff, because the amount of land we're talking about is only a small portion of the amount of land ultimately needed to satisfy the goal of zero discharge to the stream. So there is an opportunity in future, if all the parties are willing to cooperate and work together, for other species to be introduced in the future under the right circumstances, yeah?
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. We have a pivot irrigation area of approximately 20 hectares that is not greatly suited to willow because of the height of willow, and the pivot irrigation means it's over the top. But we do have 20 hectares there, so at some point when the equipment may have reached the end of its useful life, there is 20 hectares that we could look at altering there. And if we, as you mentioned, we need approximately 110 to 80 to 110 hectares worth of additional land in order to achieve our goal of not discharging to waterways. And that leaves a huge possibility for different species and different trials and different research.
Yeah, emphasis on cooperation.
Okay, thank you. Jill.
So obviously Kevin and from Green Chem and Don asked if they could have area for demonstration. So what you're saying is currently that is not an option because you've got your 5 hectares and.
So we've so I think the challenge for us is the desire for iwi to have native species, and a trial around native species was quite important. So we've identified 5 hectares that we could do with that. Greater Wellington have said they require the entire space, so they didn't want to shrink their space. So our question is, how many, do we add another trial? And Don has about 0.2 hectares in Homebush in Masterton, and that trial has finished. He's looking for a bigger trial here in Carterton, and at this stage I haven't got the land to do that.
But that could be available in the future.
Absolutely.
How long does the pivot irrigation equipment last? How long is it?
I think it'd be easier to find new land than it would be to wait for the pivot irrigation to reach the end of its natural life. So,
just one comment that I'd make is around the outside of our circle of pivot irrigation, there is a bit of free land around the outside. And I don't know whether that's been taken into consideration.
Councillor Dalla, that was precisely where I was going to build a manuka trial.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so that's where that's
So,
going.
yeah, so some of that land is available for, as you say, a manuka trial or whatever.
Yeah, Dale, we got another question.
Yeah, just that I suppose something that kind of got a little bit lost in all the discussions through the advisory group. The focus became species to plant, but actually the most important, well, and this is a question really, Jeff, is the most important aspect of this to council is having an organisation with the resources and the reputation to be able to take over management of that site in order to deliver it for council to achieve its consent conditions. So that was the key priority, wasn't it? And then secondary was what their preference was to grow in order to achieve it.
So I think you're right. There's a passive role that council has, or we can have an active role. I think the difference between the pole nursery proposal was it was more passive, whereas the Coppice Willow is council must play an active role in developing the Coppice Willow because the infrastructure isn't available, or the group is a volunteer group and is seeking council to either commit capital or resource in order to drive the outcome. The secondary goal that we have is obviously water uptake. So that, you know, ultimately our goal is the more water is uptake, the less land we need in order to reduce our discharges to waterways.
Okay, thank you. Jill, you got another question?
Wondering, because in your report on the first paragraph of page 25 of the agenda, yeah, you're saying that obviously these voluntary groups, clearly they don't have any funding or assistance, but I understand that Don was suggesting bringing in this company called Green Chem and Lavello Estate, who would do it. So that's really not an issue from what I can see from now.
So, yep, and that's news today. And Don's been part of the advisory group the whole way through, and this is brand new right now at the last minute. So it hasn't been part of our conversations, and I haven't had time to review whether or not that is practical or achievable.
Yeah.
It's It's quite late in the piece.
Yeah, as often these things are, particularly new technologies. Yeah.
Steve, you got a question?
Thank you, His Worship. Jeff, I just have a question around, is there any potential risk for council of Greater Wellington Regional Council restricting timings for our water to be able to be used within their nursery? So if council are ready to discharge and Greater Wellington say no, is there a risk around that?
So that's a very good question, Councillor Cretney. The challenge is, so we're using a deficit irrigation process, and that will depend on the amount of moisture in the soil. And the problem occurs in winter. Obviously, deficit irrigation is challenging in winter because your soil is already quite wet. As you recall, the reservoirs that we are currently constructing have the ability and essentially are the battery and surplus capacity for that wastewater. And so the reservoirs are there in order to allow us to breathe in and out with regards inflows and outflows. And it's those reservoirs that will allow us to manage the flows, so we can have higher flows in summer from the reservoirs, and we can use the reservoirs to back up during the winter when we are unable to discharge deficit irrigation at the speed or rate we would like to. So essentially the two will be used in tandem.
Kira. Any further questions? Okay. Okay, so if there's no further questions, discussion, comments, I'll open it up. So please put your hand up if you would like to discuss, comment. Okay, Steve.
Thanks, His Worship. Firstly, I just really want to acknowledge Jeff and the role that he's played in the relationship building with our iwi partners. As the community will be aware, Ngāti Kahukura Whiria were left out of the initial dealings to do with the Daleton farm, and I just want to really reiterate that Jeff's involvement in this has really brought that relationship forward and in such a positive way. And I can only see good things in the future for these partnerships. And I just want to say you can't underestimate them. And Greater Wellington Regional Council's role in this is extremely important as well. And that's not just to support them in a pole and willow nursery as such. It's the financial implications that would be put onto council without their involvement moving forward at a fast pace that we need to move. So I also want to say that I value Don Bell's input and Kevin's presentation today. Sustainable Wairarpa's involvement in the advisory group moving forward and the potential land use moving forward as land becomes available. I think that those partnerships could come to fruition, and that's just something that we need to keep in mind, that with an open mind, if the information's there, that's a good decision that we'll need to make at that time. So I just want to thank everyone for that have formed part of this advisory group to get us to this point we are now. And I think there's so much information there, you could actually become confused by it all. So I think we need to really look at the full outcomes for the future as well, where these other partners can come into it. So I just want to say thanks, especially to you, Jeff, for your role in it. So thank you.
Kia ora, Steve. Yep, kia ora. Robin.
Yes, Steve said some of my thoughts that I had written down as well. I think the relationship building with the Hapu and Greater Wellington Regional Council, that's the way forward in so many other areas, and having these relationships is really, really important. And the other thing too is with the relationship with Ngāti Kahukura Whiria, the fact that they are supporting our strategy of removing all discharge of treated wastewater into the waterways, and they are looking for this process to be sped up as much as possible. And I think from my understanding in the meetings in the advisory group, that Greater Wellington Regional Council, if we approve this, are pretty much ready to push the go button on their side as well. So thank you, Jeff. Reiterating Steve's thanks. Your input and conversations have really moved us forward much further than we have been in the past.
Kia ora, Robin. Any other, Jill?
Oh, yep. I'd like to thank the advisory group that have done a great job in looking at those supplementary papers. They were massive and very confusing. Look, an ex-councillor, obviously ratepayer, rang after looking at the report yesterday and just mentioned from his perspective that actually he believes that in the future there will be lower demand for poles. I'll tell you why in a second. So that's why I think that we should also be very aware of future technologies, such as the technology that Don and Kevin brought to us. The reason being is that farms will be using less poles because farms are actually turning to pine. He was mentioning, poles have been planted since the 1970s. And he mentioned one farmer here in Carterton district who has, a few years ago, had 8 farming neighbours Now, today, they only have one, the rest are planted in pines. So that increases the stabilisation of land, which is why the poles are planted in the first place. So although I'm very happy with obviously what's been happening and the recommendation brought forward, that possibly will be the only land that we use for poles, because there will be probably diminishing need for poles. So that was really how that was. I also just wanted to mention that in 7.11 of this agenda, we talk about the draft national adaptation plan, and that very much points out to nature-based solutions and the kind of solutions that obviously Green Chem is producing is totally and utterly that. So that would be very much part of our climate change. So I think that it would be really good to bring Melanie and Lisa from Carterton to show them these are the kind of things that could happen. So I think we need to be looking forward. So I would like to maybe have another recommendation, but basically just stating that we will be open to new technologies in the future and open to discussion when and if it's appropriate with those people, particularly the guys that came today.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Any other comment? Brian.
Thanks, Greg. You know, I obviously have read all the reports several times and have learned a lot in the last week about alternatives to pole planting. Well, I do support the option of the partnership with iwi and Greater Wellington in developing the pole nursery, with the thoughts, as Jill has pointed out, for future development of new technology, basically Manuka and the Coppice Willow. Whilst the risk involved with the pole nursery is basically minimal to our council, and that's the way I like it. And basically, it is by far the least cost capital investment that we're going to have to look at. So, yeah, with that in mind, I support the pole nursery. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm supportive of the recommendation. I don't feel it's necessary to add another recommendation to that requiring working with any specific organisation or any specific species, partly because the technology is adapting all the time, but also willingness and cooperation are the key. And the head manager or leasee of that area needs to have the flexibility to work with the organisations that are willing to cooperate and work alongside them. So I understand the reasoning behind it, but I'd just be a little bit cautious about putting a recommendation forward that puts an onus on a future manager of that area to do any particular thing. I think that can be dealt with in a management contract or a lease agreement rather than a recommendation council. That's my first reaction to that.
Okay, thank you.
His worship, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just say that as part of the advisory group, our last meeting that we held, you'll read in this report under point 5, it actually states the decision on this 21 hectare site will not predetermine or limit alternatives from being considered on future land-based irrigation locations. So yeah, it's right there.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Is there any other further comment? Okay, well, I just going to make a few observations. I mean, the secret to this, and the reason we are here now in this situation, is because of the advisory group. We really value the advisory group, and everything that we've got in front of us came from the advisory group. So it's really important that we keep using the advisory group, and the advisory group is not going to disappear. It's going to keep functioning, and it's through that advisory group that recommendations will come through to council. So it's important that the advisory group is valued and utilised, and yeah, it's basically that with that. But the ultimate goal is no discharge to waterways, and that's where we're heading, and that's the goal. And this is just one of quite a few more steps. So thank you for everyone that's been involved, and especially you, Jeff, and Steve as chair. You've done a great job as chair, so thank you. And so we'll go to the recommendations. So just before we go to recommendations, is everyone comfortable that the report covers what Jill brought up? Are you comfortable with that, Jill?
It's on it, yep, the advisory group, that the conversation will continue.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So as that's the case, then we'll go to recommendations, and there's two of them. The first one is we received the report. Can I have a mover? Steve, would you like to move that? Yep, moved by Steve and seconded by Dale. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone against? Carried. Thank you. And number two, delegates authority to the CEO to enter into a partnership with Ngāti Kahu Kuria Whiria and Greater Wellington Regional Council to develop a pole nursery on the second irrigation area of approximately 21 hectares at Daleton Farm Wastewater Treatment Plant. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Brian. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone against? Carried. Well done, team.
Yep, brilliant. Good effort.
Yep. All right.
Saw Summer's hand when you said anyone against. I saw Summer's hand.
There it is. There it goes.
Yeah, it's just.
Well,
thank you, team.
Yeah,
Great.
thanks, team.
Thank you. Right, so we're only on to the third report now. So this is 7.3, and that's a response to the key findings of the wastewater treatment plant and Clocktower review. And welcome to the table, Infrastructure Services Manager, Johannes Ferreira. Welcome, Johannes, and I'll hand it to you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good afternoon, councillors. So in response to the caliber report, or into the findings, we thought about the findings, and the recommendation of the report is that we're going to put together a project management guideline that would basically have a flow chart with decision forcing officers to make certain decisions in certain times. This process will mean that our project delivery will become more risk averse. So it'll potentially slow down process, but it will mean that we will take extra time in considering and managing risk. The proposition is that we're going to develop this guideline towards the end of this calendar year, and while we're working on developing the guideline, we're also reviewing current projects to fall in line with what we eventually will develop. Thank you.
Okay, I'll open up for questions. Thank you. Dale.
Two questions. One is the project management guideline. There's plenty of best case examples of what a project management guideline looks like. So are you intending to start from scratch and build one specific to CDC, or you'll use the best practice that's out there to create something that?
The intention is to use best practices out there, borrow from other councils, and learn from systems that works properly. The key outcome or the key goal is to have a flowchart system that guides all officers delivering projects to firstly consider specific risks, and then have mechanisms in place to manage those risks. So it's not reinventing the wheel. We'll learn from others, and it's basically just to standardize our approach across council and across all projects.
And private sector, not just local government, like in terms of best practice and templates.
Yes, I think my background comes from private sector, so we will draw on some on that experience, and yes, and then if there's anything to be added from private sector, then we would consider that.
The last question I had was, I guess this is a project management, it's a guideline only. What reassurance do we have in governance that, because words are one thing, people and actions are the other. What reassurance do we have that once we have a guideline, that it actually follows through in the process and that the result that the guideline is seeking to strengthen or improve is actually achieved?
Chief, would you like?
Perhaps I could answer that. Sorry, Williams. I think I think the key is how we knit the guideline in with our policy. Yes. And so the starter for 10 would be the procurement policy that we need, that really sees when projects go through that go, no go phase, procurement kicks in, we go out to market, we tender the responses, we bring that back to determine whether or not it fits the scope and the budget and the timeframe. And I think so it's how we knit the guideline in with our policy. So the first piece that we will do following the project management guideline set up is to review the procurement policy to make sure the two knit together in terms of outcomes that we expect to deliver, and also will complete and deliver the review findings from the calibre report, so that we are actually covering in those bases.
And so the triggers are either in advance of or real time, not retrospective, so that we can address it as governance.
That's correct. That's the guideline will provide the tests of, so we have a plan, we've gone and tested the market with a plan, and the market's come back and told us that, we were on another planet, so we've gone back and reviewed the plan. Or we're on the same planet, we can go forward, you'll achieve the outcomes within the timeframe, within the budget and within the scope. I think that's the intention that we've got behind it, and it's guidelines that will fit in neatly with our policies that really are what we control the organisation with.
Can I just add to that, please? So further close to or aligned with the triggers, the intention of the triggers is also to trigger certain contingencies, certain project team layout. So being more risk averse, instead of just the she'll be all right attitude, we will say, well, this is a complex project, so we determine ABC, which will obviously come at a cost, but those triggers will then determine that this is required, and that will also guide the officers through that decision-making process.
Yeah, I mean, this is an FYI report. You're not asking for our approval. This is a management tool you're creating as a response to the report. I guess there's a lot riding on the outcome more so than whatever process you want to follow, because we want to make sure we get it right.
The other thing that is less policy related, but it's all about behaviour. And so that's the behaviour you expect to see from management, following the guidelines, following the policy, and making sure there are no surprises. So
thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, Robin. You've got a question.
Yeah, thank you. Apologies, my sound keeps dropping in and out, so I'm having I think the connection at the hotel we're in is not as great as it could be. Just a question under your 0.5 next steps. Would it be appropriate for Calibre to review the guidelines, bearing in mind that they have put this report together for us?
So, Councillor Robin, so firstly, they did not put together this report, but they did do the independent review of the two projects.
Sorry, I meant their independent review. Apologies.
I think they could review it. However, from their recommendations, I would say our management guideline would be superior to what they've recommended. And therefore, I wouldn't necessarily put it as a requirement that Calibre has to review our guideline.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering if a peer review would be appropriate, and as you said, that's not required. So thanks, Johannes.
Perhaps, Councillor Jerry Campbell, we could bring them back through audit and risk.
Yeah.
If that would be, if the council would prefer that, we bring the guidelines back through audit and risk. So they're not necessarily a policy document which council need to adopt or approve, but we can certainly circulate them through and have an independent view over them with Philip King.
I think that would be really appropriate. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Rebecca, you have a question.
Yeah, just really support that idea to bring them back through audit and risk once they're developed. I probably would support that they are integrated with the procurement policy though, and that the procurement policy is adopted by council still, because that would make a lot of sense. You answered my question already, Johannes. I was going to ask, you know, do these measures, do they meet all the recommendations that Calibre has suggested? And it's awesome to hear that you've gone above and beyond. That's fantastic. My second question is just around, we have been recommended in the past to have a contract management policy. Do you see this as a direction that we should be heading in as well, or not?
Councillor, it could potentially, I would say that the guideline would sit outside of the policy. However, the policy could refer to the guideline, so that the guideline can still could regularly be reviewed with our more freely, if that makes sense, Jeff.
Perhaps, Councillor Vickans, I think that's a really good question around contract management. My initial feeling is we have an in-sourced contract team for our water operations and for our parks and reserves, and we have a joint venture with our roadings team. So I wouldn't say there would be enormous risk around developing contract management. I think it's certainly something that we could do once we've completed these guidelines and refreshed the procurement policy, and do that as an appendix to perhaps the procurement policy. But I think with in-source teams, it's probably not as important as it would be if we had large outsourced contracts. But it's certainly a good question, and I'll take that one on board. It's a really good point.
Awesome, thank you.
Any further questions? No, I've just got a question. Just along on a project basis, and the guidelines are followed. Are we relying on the new guidelines and the sound process to ensure that it's done correctly, or is there another layer of oversight that will have a look at that process and not quite peer review it, but just double check that each project is done right? Because quite often you think you're doing it right and it needs another lens.
So that lens will be the ELT. So we as an ELT will step into that oversight of the various projects through our capital review planning sessions, and I think that's where you will get a different lens, a different pair of eyes across projects, rather than just this is my project, this is my idea, I want to go with it. You'll get the entire view of the ELT as to whether or not that project is the risks are appropriately covered.
Okay.
Further to that as well, there's a layer between the officer delivering the project and ELT as well. So there's the project manager or the project management team, and then which reports to the infrastructure manager, which sits on ELT. So there's two layers where it goes up to, and then
and ultimately, on some projects it'll come back to governance too. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, well, those triggers will bring it back.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Is there any further questions before we open up for discussion? No, it's a good question, thank you. So now discussion comment. Steve.
Thanks, His Worship. Johannes, I just really want to thank you for the proactive way you've gone about this. An expectation of when I was elected onto council, I expected a lot of this to already be incorporated in council. So I just think what those 2 reviews have been highlighted by Calibre, you've really nailed it down with this project management guideline that you're going to be setting up, and it's just another thing that I think is great with the way this council's moving forward. So just congratulations on that, and I look forward to seeing the success that this will bring. So thank you.
Yeah, kia ora, Steve. Any other comment?
What he said.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're all in agreement with that. We're in the room anyway. Okay, if there's no further comment, we'll go to the recommendation. So that's 1, we received the report. Cover mover, please. Moved by Dale, seconded by Robin. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? Carried. Congratulations, well done.
So we could just ask Robin tomorrow if we can bring it.
Yeah, Robin, could we note that it's they'll come back to the Audit and Risk Committee, please? Thank you. Right, so now move on to item 7.4, which is the Animal Shelter Project Delivery Report. And welcome to the table, Planning and Regulatory Services Manager, Solitaire Robertson. I hand it over to you, Solitaire.
Thank you. Timely that this report is coming after Johannes's report prior. Your Worship, the Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Councillors, I'm not going to apologise for putting this report in front of you. Having been on the other side of the table, I do understand what you must have felt and what the community felt reading this report for the first time the other day. As an officer, though, it is my responsibility to identify the risks, the issues, and to provide the elected members with the most up-to-date information so that you can make the best decisions for this fantastic community. This is exactly what I have endeavoured to do via this report. I would like to take my report as read. I would like to touch on just a couple of points in relation to the $46,000 that has already been spent on this project. 13,000 of that is for the site prep. That is not any form of waste of money. That site prep needs to be done, and when you go out on the site, it actually is looking really great down there with that. If the elected members were of the opinion to go with the option 1, the balance of that money that has already been spent has been well spent on designing those plans and modifying those plans, including those engineering reports and the fire report. If option 3 was chosen, there is a portion of that $46,000 money that has been spent that we would be just waving goodbye to. As a couple of just figures that I've been having a look at around the country, just taking a little bit of a snapshot. As of yesterday, Palmerston North City Council did update their website with a video link around their existing facility, which looks like the Hilton compared to ours, and that's their non-compliant pound. Their new pound bill as of yesterday was $7.3 million, which is looking at about $15,000 per square metre build cost. Our build cost is looking around the 4.5 to 5K per square metre mark. 2001 Kaitaia did their new pound for 12 dogs, that was 1.5 million. Wanganui has spent 1 million on their pound, and Danny Burke in 2001 spent $90,000 just replacing their floor because it needed upgrading. So they were just the points that I did want to take within as additional to my report, and I am happy to answer any questions or receive any feedback from the elected members.
Thank you. I know there's going to be a lot of discussion on this, so if we could keep the discussion to later, and we'll just ask questions on clarity of the report first. So I'll open up for questions first, please. Right.
For one, the lifespan of the buildings that have been specified in option 1 and option 3, obviously option 3 being a kit set type building, is predicted lifespan being put into account?
So lifespan, predicted lifespan, any building consent issued is built to a 50-year lifespan. So both those structures would be compliant for a 50-year span.
Thank you.
Question from Dale.
Yeah, under point 4, your first sentence is council is obligated to provide a fit for purpose dog pound facility. That is a key. It's not really expanded on in here, but I think the general public's expectation is it's less of a hotel and more of a jail, and in terms of what we provide, but it's not really expanded on here. Is the Act is pretty explicit on what a council is legally obliged to provide. So it's not a desire of council to provide better than minimum. The minimum standard is high. Can you just share that in the public forum so that people are aware of what we're trying to deliver on?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Williams. So the Animal Control Act 1999, Section 10, talks about the obligations of owners and persons in charge of animals, and that includes us as a local authority. So it does note in there that owners of animals, or every person in charge of an animal, must ensure that the physical, health and behavioural needs of an animal are met, and they say in accordance with both A, good practice, and B, scientific knowledge. Where it gets a little bit tricky is the most recent Code of Welfare for the temporary housing of animals. The Code of Welfare has got quite a number of compliance measures in it that they do recognise themselves are higher than what is expected in the Act, but we would get caught up in that best practice. Examples of that is if we were to have an animal in our care, theoretically we should be having some electronic scales down there so they get weighed as they come in, and they should be weighed at least twice a day so that we can ensure that their weight has been maintained for the duration of the stay. Every animal that's in our care, there is an obligation that they are provided shelter, that they are kept warm and temperature controlled. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a heat pump situation in there. There's other mechanisms around the place where they will just use heat lamps, which can then be adjusted for the different heights, sizes, coat types of the dogs. These are all the options that we are looking at. The Code of Welfare doesn't have the legal teeth because it is only a code. But if we were then found to be not compliant with that Section 10 of the Animal Welfare Act, we could, under a prosecution, and they would use non-compliance with the code as part of the prosecution mechanisms, of a fine of up to $250,000. I hope that explains a little bit more about the obligations.
Yeah, well, I just think, that's, sorry, that's really getting into a comment. No, it's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, well done, Dale.
Okay, well, there's a couple of quick questions. Have we ever been prosecuted for our current facility, which of course is well?
No, we haven't. Okay. We did have MPI sniffing around not that long ago, which did result in the shade sail being put over the existing kennels.
And how many dogs per year on average do we house, and how many dog nights do we house?
I can't answer you the dog nights without going into details on every single one. However, last financial year being 20 to 21, there was 43 and impoundings, and then this financial year being 21 to 22, we have impounded 45 dogs. But in terms of average nights of stay, we can gather that information, but I'd need to run some separate reports.
How many dogs are we catering, or have I missed it in a report for?
The initial plan was to be catering for 8. The facility is designed for a long-term 8, and that is what we would be intending to do.
And it's called an animal facility. Are we intending to look after any other types of animals?
We do have an obligation to look after other types of animals as well. Given that it is a building and we could always house other cages. The temporary housing of animals code also includes dealing with reptiles. We generally wouldn't really be dealing with other animals on that site, but you could have temporary storage, but that's also, you'd flip them off to the SPCA or other other organisations that are probably in a better place to care for it if it was something like a reptile
Or horse.
or a horse. Yeah.
Thank you. Steve, you have a question?
Thanks, His Worship. Mine is pretty well around what Jill's already asked. I was just curious as to whether any other councils had been prosecuted under the Animal Act. Because this to me leads on to our decision making today. And if MPI visited and asked us to put up a shade sale and so forth, then maybe what we're doing is okay with a bit of money to raise it up even a little bit better. So I'm just curious as to whether any other council has been prosecuted.
To be honest, Councillor Cretney, I haven't done a lot of digging on that. I've been looking into our situation. I would potentially recommend that councillors do have a look at that video of the Palmerston North Dog Pound that MPI is threatening to prosecute them over, and their reasoning for having to build the new facility. Because if you have a look at that building where there is a threat of prosecution, and then you have a look at our pound, I wouldn't be comfortable putting council in a position of risk where we could be fined up to $250,000.
Okay, is there any other further questions? Okay, thank you for answering those questions. So now we'll open it up for discussion. Who would like to kick that off?
Excuse me, Your Worship.
Yes.
If elected members would like to watch the video, that is something I could potentially screen share on here. It's 3 minutes long. I've got the right one.
Yeah, why not?
Okay. So we're now going to watch the video of the old Palmerston North Pound.
Is it the video from yesterday on the new animal shelter building?
Yeah, it's a main video on their website.
Hopefully I have found the right video.
Yep.
That looks right.
Dreamer even, wasn't it?
Thank you. I'm just a bit concerned that anyone just joining the stream now be wondering what's going on. I'll just have, Jeff, your comment just before we open it up for discussion. Yeah.
Kia ora. Just to confirm, that was Palmerston North's dog pound, not Carterton District Council's dog pound that we were showing there. So I just like to acknowledge that, councillors, this is probably the last paper you ever wanted to read again. This decision has been going around for a long period of time. And also I'd like to acknowledge Solitaire, because this is quite a difficult decision and a difficult first paper to bring to council as a new ELT member, because this is, you know, quite a challenging decision. We have made a commitment as management to ensure that we will not start a project that we don't believe we can complete within the timeframe and the budget and the scope that you've given us. And this is the first project that we've come across. I'm sure there will be more. You know, I hope there aren't too many more, but you know, statistics would indicate that there will be other occasions where we have to come back to you with decisions where what we thought was going to be suitable isn't. And I'd just like to say that, you know, whilst you have not enjoyed reading this paper, we've certainly not enjoyed writing it and bringing it back to you. But I think this is part of the process of facing up to the reality of what we have in terms of construction cost increase and delivering services for our community. So thank you for taking the time and considering our request.
Thank you, Jeff. Right, discussion. Who would like to open discussion? Jill.
I have one last question, another question, really, and that is, you mentioned under next steps that we could engage with South Wairarapa should they wish to participate, but clearly we don't want them to be part of this decision. Would we be in a situation whereby we could offer them a per dog per night kind of rate in case they don't want to actually go ahead and put in the capital to create a dog pound down their neck of the woods, which is what I wanted for us to do with Masterton. Would have been fantastic, but we somehow didn't manage to achieve that with
Okay, well,
Masterton.
yeah, we'll just answer the question. Thank you.
The answer is yes. We could, and we do. We have helped recently Masterton out with a particular animal that was quite loud, and they didn't want in their pound in the city. So the answer is yes. We would be more than happy to engage further with them. I don't think it should be a precursor of this recommendation, but more than happy to participate with future conversations.
Yeah, just seems to me that with 45 odd dogs, it's a hell of a lot of money to put on for that kind of a population. Out of the, how many dogs have we got in the district? 2,500 odd?
2,009.
Oh, nearly 3,000.
Yeah,
Very few dogs get into a pound. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to carry on with your comment, or?
No, I'll listen to some of the others first.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, sorry, His Worship. I actually had one more question, just around the 50K of necessary work. Solitaire, can you just explain a little bit of what that 50K could be under option 2?
Thanks, Councillor Cretney. We put that as a figure in there because absolutely at a bare minimum, if we were going to do any work to our existing pound, that needs to be an enclosed building. We cannot be having kennels and runs there where during winter that rain can come directly down onto them. So to roof a building, to do that, there would also need to potentially be some temperature control. It's not a suitable facility. It is absolutely not a suitable facility. It's not a nice working facility for our staff either. In terms of health and safety, trying to get dogs out of those kennels and runs, in my opinion, is a risk because you cannot easily walk in there. You have to bend down, you've got to put your face down to do it. I think we've just been very lucky over the years, 1, not to have got prosecuted, and 2, not to have had a very nasty accident with our staff.
Thank you. Okay, so just to clarify, is there any further questions? Robin, you've got a question.
Yeah, sorry, and it's along that the 50K. How realistic is 50K to actually bring it up to a standard that, as you've just said, Solitaire, that we can weatherproof it and temperature control it? Because to me that sounds quite light for what you've just described.
Thank you, Councillor Cherry Campbell. As officers aren't recommending looking at option 2, we haven't done any detailed assessment of exactly what would be needed to bring that up to standard. 50k could be incredibly light. If we were even looking at trying to run with our existing facility for a year or so, that money would get absorbed incredibly quickly and probably would need more to bring it up to standard. I think you'd be throwing good money after bad.
Yeah, it's almost like a band-aid, and then it's just sort of flushing it
Yeah.
down the plug hole at the same time. Thank you, Solitaire.
Okay, is that the end of questions? Okay, we'll open up for discussion. So, Steve, would you like to start?
It'll teach you to be home.
Not particularly, but okay. Look, I was not in favour of when the budget was, well, when this was proposed a year ago. I was not in favour of it. I'm still not in favour of it. I'm still in favour of the 3 councils trying to work together and find a resolution. To have a region of our size with 3 separate dog pounds just does not make sense to me. And while I'm very thankful of Solitaire putting all this together, as Jeff has mentioned, it just, for the amount of dogs we've got, for the amount of dogs who might potentially stay in these kennels overnight, out of the 45 that have been mentioned, it might only be 10 dogs that stay the night, or 20 dogs, and the others are all delivered back home. I just see the fact that social media has become so involved in trying to find dogs for people online and to get them home. It just does not make sense to me, apart from the regulatory side of it that could be pushed onto us to do this. So sadly, I'm just not in favour of spending this kind of money on having dogs in a hotel, as such, is what I called it last time, and I'll call it the same again. So thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to comment? Who would like to go next? Brian.
Thanks, Mayor Greg. Yeah, I've prepared some notes over the last couple of days, so I'll just run through those. I thank Steve for already commenting on some of the points that I've got down here. But we've been talking about and discussing this project now since around about 2017 from memory. 14.
No, probably 7.
Okay, well, I've got 17, but anyway, it's been a long time. So, and I acknowledge that this is an unfunded mandated requirement from central government, which is the bit that the unfunded bit that really hurts. A combined district pound has not been possible because the 3 councils have not been able to get the support in the past. And I believe mainly the main problem getting this project over the line has been the previous CEs and officers within each council not supporting it, and also some councillors. And also that the cost cannot be a cost neutral facility. It costs and will continue to do so. We now have new CEs and officers in each council and also councillors and all TAs that are willing to talk. In the last couple of days, I've spoke to councillors in the MDC and South Wairarapa District Council, and they both tell me they're willing to talk and renegotiate. The ratepayers of the Wairarapa cannot afford to build and support 3 new dog pounds. Marston's figures from memory were 1.6 million. South Wairarapa District Council figures that I actually got this morning for a modular 4 dog pound was 360k. Our updated estimates now put our project for Carterton ratepayers at around the $600,000 mark. The figures don't stack up. 600 for build and yet an income for impounding fees from an average of 40 to 50 dogs per year, plus a few other animals. $70 per dog impounding fee for the first time. So the revenue for fees is probably less than 5,000 a year, but I stand to be corrected. And also add into that labour, operational costs and depreciation. Perhaps the whole project should be cost neutral, but that will cost the dog owners. In a business sense, it still doesn't stack up. I realise there is a wellbeing issue into the fact also. We need to revisit this again. The spend above budgeted and approved figures is not acceptable to me. I've had phone calls from concerned ratepayers on the spend. I would like to add another option to the recommendations, that we defer the project until we have a definite decision back from the other two TAs, being say South Wairau District Council and MDC. That's me at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Who else would like to comment?
I'll comment. Yep, I agree with Steve and Brian, and I can't add anything more to what they have said.
Okay. Any other further comment?
Yeah, sorry, I've just got a comment. I mean, to be honest, I had come to the meeting today. I'm not prepared to spend this much money on a pound on our own. And I have, I was going to and still going to vote in line with my previous position on this issue. I don't want to relitigate it necessarily. And I think if we are going to go down that route, we have got to have a very clear timeline. With some it's going to have to be done in a very tight manner, because we have attempted this for a number of years, and it's going to be very tricky. However, I'm still sticking to my previous views that I don't think we need our own pound. I don't agree with us spending this money on our own. It's interesting, the pounds that Solitaire brought up at the start of this conversation, Kaitaia and Whanganui specifically, both of their pounds would be enough with the cost they had to accommodate the whole Wairarapa, all of our dogs, plus some probably. And that was, those £2 specifically were part of the pounds that we looked at shared services. But anyway, I said I wasn't going to relitigate it necessarily. I accept the previous decision that the council has made. However, I'm still not comfortable spending that money on our own.
Okay, thank you. Russell.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I think, firstly, I'll just say thank you to the management team for all the effort they have put in. It's been a huge job, and to bring it to us now and to start having us doing what we're doing there is pretty tough, but it needs to be done. The whole report points one direction to me, that we need to be having a shared pound with either Marsden or South Wairau District Council. The whole thing just shows to me that we cannot afford as Carterton to have our own separate facility to use. So I will not be voting for this motion, and I will be asking that we go back into discussions with the other councils around having a shared facility that we can all utilise. And I think if the other councils don't look at that seriously with us, then they've obviously got way more money than we have, and a lot more richer ratepayers than we have that can afford it. So at the end of the day, paying another council $70 a night to house an animal for us is the cheapest option in my opinion, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Russell. Any other further comment? Dale.
Yeah, well, firstly, I'm pleased this is back on our table. It may not seem like it, but that's showing that the process is working, because we're bought into this. That's where the buck stops with us, to be able to make these calls. I'm not a dog owner, never have been, and I don't particularly like them. In my opinion, someone keeping a dog, it's a lifestyle choice. And as a non-dog owner, it bothers me to have to fund the consequences of dogs in town. And I suppose when I look at some of the costs, it's frustrating that owners of working dogs, farmers and rural people who manage their dogs in a different way to town people, would be paying for this sort of thing. But that's by the by. And partly, I mean, every dog I see out and about down at Sparks Park at the moment's got a raincoat on and even gumboots. So the dog owners have raised the standard pretty high, which has driven these animal acts where the expectation now is a dog can't be out in the rain. Well, you know, I always thought they were bred that way, but they clearly can't be. They've got to be warm and dry and so forth. So, you know, it's partly the reason the standard is so high for a dog pound is because dog owners and people with dogs have set the bar pretty high. And so we're kind of a victim of that a little bit. But look, I suppose the question, I accept all my colleagues, because in theory, and a district of this size or a region with only 50,000 people and the number of dogs we had, it's crazy to be considering £3. I'm fairly late on the scene, but I know from what Rebecca has said with shared services and so forth, and this conversation has gone on for a long time. If the desire from us today is to go and rediscuss with the other councils, what certainty have we got, other than just individual councils telling individual ones of us that they're willing to talk? What if we don't get any further than we've ever got? Then what? Because talk's cheap. Everybody says, yeah, we want to have another conversation, but they've got to get it past the conversation into a budget, into an MOU and an agreement. And that we haven't achieved that in 10, 14 years, Councillor Jill has just said. So if we don't, what's our fallback plan? So I guess, you know, I wouldn't like to just us end today on, oh, well, let's go back and have more conversations, because what do we do in the meantime? What's our obligation with what we've currently got? And what if those, what's the timeline on conversations? And what if they don't achieve anything?
Yeah, thank you, Dale. Just before I go to you, Rebecca, I'm going to jump in here too.
I've got something to say as well when you're finished too.
Okay. And so is Russell by the look of it too. So we'll be going around again, but that's all good because it's part of the conversation. Just because of this issue, I started to go back through a whole lot of notes and different emails and just looking at what happened. And the three councils trying to work together has been fraught. At no stage was there a Wairarapa lens put on. They thought they were looking through a Wairarapa lens, but it's a parochial lens. And the blank canvas was never a blank canvas. It was almost torn before it started. So if we're going to work towards a joint pound, there has to be a total agreement that we're going to have a blank canvas. And I believe the only way to do that is to agree to an independent person to oversee that process, and we all accept the recommendations of the independent person, because we're going to go nowhere. I can guarantee that. But if you look at what's on the table now, we agreed to build a pound. We also agreed for it to come back to us if it was going to cost more than that, which it has. So it's come back, and it's substantially over the amount, and but it does state that it's going to be funded from reserves too. So there's no capital costs. So that's something to bear in mind as well. But if we're going to be serious about going for a joint pound, all the councillors in the Wairarapa have to agree, I believe, to a total blank canvas. And we can't have this, it's got to be here or it's got to be there. So there's obviously more conversation to have, so I'll pass it over to you, Rebecca.
Do you want to go first, Robin? I think you had your hand up first. Oh, okay. The only two things I probably would add to the conversation, kind of in response to Dale. So since we stopped having the shared pound conversations, I believe that Masterton has actually backtracked quite significantly on their animal facility, and they're only looking at housing dogs again now. So if we were going to go down this track, the very first thing we'd have to do is sit down and say, yes, we do want a shared pound. and then we need to decide on our service levels. So this is what kind of was a stumbling block along the conversation, is that Masterton has a bit of an increased service than we were providing. However, now they've gone back to that, the dog alone, standalone facility, that might ease that conversation. So there is going to have to be a conversation around give and take. We won't be able to have a complete win on all the things that we want, and same goes for Masterton. Then I think probably the second thing or third thing I'd say is I would like to see this service to be funded through the users. It should be relatively cost neutral. There might be, 5% something that comes from our general rate as something, is it a public benefit, but ultimately it should be cost neutral to those that are using the service and that have dogs registered. So I feel like it's relatively straightforward, but yeah, it comes back to that service level that we have to agree together.
Willingness.
Okay, thank you. Apologies, Robin.
That's
But go ahead.
No worries. I agree with a lot of the comments around the table. Having sat in shared services, it was incredibly frustrating. As Rebecca's just said, we couldn't even agree the level of service. Masterton were wanting a level of service that was Hilton standard, and it was just not an option. Russell mentioned, if we pay a $70 per dog house per night, in an ideal world, that would be great. But from the conversations we had in shared services, that was never an option on the table. They were wanting us to put money into investing and building a new pound facility. Jeff, I can defer to you. With the other CEs, maybe the conversations could be slightly different. But Rebecca, you've hit the nail on the head. If we are going to go back again, 2007 you said, Jill, and discuss shared facilities, we need to agree the level of service, number one. We actually need to really understand whether our neighbours do have an appetite or whether it's just going to be another talk fest. This has gone round and around. I'm not happy with this amount of money, but the square metre percentage increase in the last 3 years, God only knows what it's going to be in another 2 years if we keep blimmin' just talking and not doing. It's a really, really hard one. It's the capital outlay for it, as Greg mentioned, can be funded from reserves. I would like to go back to our neighbours and at a CE level and have a conversation whether it is a realistic option or a viable option for us to have a shared pound facility. I think we need a time limit on it, and I think that time limit needs to be short because we don't have time with the increases and inflation. If we wait another 6 months, this is going to be $1 million the way prices are going up. So yeah, it's really hard. Solitaire, thank you for your work that you put into it. And thank you for presenting it. It's not a good one. It's a great report, but it's not a great conversation for us to be having yet again. I wish I had a magic wand. Working with our neighbours is going to be fraught. Our neighbours don't all turn up to our combined council meetings. So whether we can get an agreement on this, I don't know. I have faith that, with the new CEs and the new leaderships teams on both, maybe we can have. Nothing more to add.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Is there further comment?
To be honest, I feel like leading into the elections is a really good time to have this conversation because it puts the onus on people to actually just get a move on and get stuff done. I would give it a month. If we can't get agreement in a month, we just carry on with the way that we're going.
Which is?
The meeting.
Okay. I might just break from a tradition, but I might ask the Chief Executive to make a comment on a process you believe to get the other, because you'll be the one that's been, looks like you're going to be given the job to get some sort of agreement to go forward in a way, yeah.
Kia ora, Your Worship, councillors. I think perhaps my question is more about clarity, and I think Rebecca's hit the nail on the head. Having conversations with individual councillors with our neighbours to the north and south isn't a resolution from Masterton District Council or South Wairarapa District Council to do something or to instruct their chief executive. And I think that's the piece that we will actually need in order to enable the CEs to develop a joint pound. We need a resolution from the two councils, similar to a resolution that you were about to pass, in order to enact this, to make this happen. Otherwise, it will just be another conversation about talking that doesn't go any further. I also recommend you do need a plan B, as Rebecca suggested, that the default decision is if that hasn't happened by X time, we then approve, you approve the budget. So, and you make that decision now, because I don't want to bring this back again, and I'm sure you don't want us to bring this back again. So perhaps I would be happy to pick up a recommendation for you from you to discuss with my counterparts in North and South. That needs to really be enacted and encouraged. You need to encourage the counterparts to make those resolutions at their own council meetings, to delegate to their chief executives. Otherwise, it's unlikely this is going to proceed. That would be my recommendation, but also have a plan B, because we can't have no plan. The alternative for plan B may be that you authorise some expenditure on our existing account.
Councillor Grady.
How much time would you need? What do you think would be a timeline to actually try and get that?
I think Rebecca's absolutely right. If we were unable to do this by the end of, well, a month is July. Yeah, if we were unable as CEs to do this by the end of July, we're won't happen. Yeah, it won't happen.
So bearing in mind the other councils are in meetings today and tomorrow.
So perhaps we need another month beyond
for
them to have an election. You know, a meeting
to happen before the end of this triennium.
If you discuss it at mayor level and you discuss it at CE level and gauge the appetite of whether they are willing to drive this through in terms of a recommendation to give the CEs some authority to come back with a master plan for each of the councils to consider. I mean, if the mayors aren't willing to drive it politically, then the instruction won't get to the CEs, will it?
I think we also need to consider level of service and location, and both of those things need to be on the table, because practically speaking, Carterton's in the middle. Having one council decide that yes, they want a common pound, as long as it's my backyard, we're wasting our time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got some recommendations. I'm going to take on those recommendations and then we'll see where we land. So the first one is we received, oh sorry, there's no further discussion?
Are you going to include a recommendation that we do defer the project until we have a definite decision from the other?
Oh, we'll go through these recommendations first and then we'll look at another one, Jeff. I think we need to clear these ones first, yeah. So the first one is we received the report. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Robin, second by Brian. All those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? It's carried. So recommendation 2 adopts either option 1, continue with the amended plans, or option 3, to proceed with alternative build plans in Dalefield Road. So we'll take, is anyone prepared to move about option 1? Okay, so that motion fails. Option 3. Okay, so that fails. So that nullifies option recommendation 3. And also nullifies option 4. So can we have another recommendation? We might just pause for a moment while we draft a one up. And in fact, what we might do is we're required under our standing orders to stop every 2 hours, and it's 2 hours now. So we might adjourn the meeting for the compulsory break. We have to have every 2 hours.
How long?
For 10 minutes.
Excuse
And we'll
me.
cut.
Sorry,
Yes.
sorry, Your Worship. Because I'm currently in Melbourne, we're meant to be heading off on a road trip. So I will need to leave at about 4 o'clock your time from the meeting, if that can be noted, please. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. It's 3:16 now, so we'll re-adjourn at 3:25. Thank you.